Hi guys, this is Dan. Welcome back to my channel. Today's video is a bit different and I don't think I have done it before because in today's video, I am going to talk about what book got me into fantasy. I try to come up with a set of questions so that you can get to know why and how I started reading. Although I have these questions here, I don't know yet. Maybe I will slightly overshare and you would know me more as like a real person. And also when I go through all these questions, you can also share your answers in the comment below. And I will also put all these questions in the descriptions so that you don't have to listen and write all these questions down. By the way, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a like, subscribe to my channel Fantasy so you won't miss any fun bookish content from me. If you don't know, this channel hasn't been monetized yet. So if you want to support me or the running of this channel, feel free to become my Patreon or visit my Ko-fi. And you can also follow my Instagram for more daily life updates. Without further ado, shall we dive into all these questions? Here comes the very first question and it is quite an obvious one. What was the first fantasy book I have ever read? I have a confession here. I started reading real late. I think I started and finished my very first fantasy book not too long ago. I think it should be around 2019, so it is in my early 20s. If you remember one of the texts that I have done before, the very first fantasy series that got me into fantasy, was A Song of Ice and Fire by George R.R. Martin. I know, Dum started this very difficult read and I haven't picked up a book in my life before. And what a challenge it is to complete a series that is with such a detailed world building. But at that time, I was watching the TV drama series and I think it is more or less around the second last season. I was thinking if this series was based on an adaptation, why not try out the books to see what is the difference between the adaptation and the book series itself. So I literally jumped into this rabbit hole and I didn't read this series because of how bad the TV drama ends. I still remember every book from this series took me a month to finish it. I know because at the time I didn't have reading as my hobby, which I think I will talk about it later because some of the text is around it. But I can still remember the joy of completing the first book, The Game of Thrones, my very first English novel in my life. And I mean, look how thick that book was and how long it took me to finish it. But still, the achievement itself gave me such a boost to read the next book. By the way, when will the next book of this series gonna be out? And I think it is over 10 years now and we still got no updates, no news about it at all. The next question is, what book made me fall in love with fantasy, this genre? Now, this is an interesting one. I remember when I was reading A Song of Ice and Fire, I was in the mindset of I need to complete this series first before starting the other one. And after maybe half a year, I finally complete this series and I was ready to try out more fantasy series. So I looked up on booktube for recommendation. This was the time I really get into this community and watched tons, and I do mean tons of videos about it. There were some big major channels doing this kind of different levels of fantasy book recommendation. And of course, A Song of Ice and Fire is the senior, most difficult one. But the one people talk about the most is definitely Brandon Sanderson.
Brandon here.
After A Song of Ice and Fire, I picked up Mistborn Era 1. And this was also the second fantasy series that I have ever completed in my life. And I mean, what a difference these two series is. A Song of Ice and Fire got a very serious, mature tone with such a detailed world building. But jumping into the world crafted by Brandon Sanderson, in a sense, it was so refreshing and bring us so much joy. There was a scene early in the series where Finn and Kelsier trying to burn up different metals and fly around the city, and I was like, it was so lively. And also how an author can play with the magic system and with so many unexpected twists along the way waiting for you. Without a doubt, Miss Bond is the series that confirms my love for fantasy this genre, and I can venture out for more different journeys, so thank you, Brandon Sanderson. So my answer for the last two questions can also answer the third one. Who and what introduced me to fantasy? If it is what, it is A Song of Ice and Fire. If it is who, it is BookTube. I guess now looking back, one good thing about the lockdown a couple of years ago is you got nothing else to do other than finding a new hobby. Also because of this, there was like a boom of BookTube and many would share their thoughts about books. I also jumped on this bandwagon at a very good time and watched tons of BookTube. With all the book reviews, with all the book recommendation, I can easily pick up my next read that majority of people would like, and hopefully I will too. Which, to be fair, I think the recommendation on BookTube is quite reliable, and very luckily I don't think anything has gone wrong for the books that I have picked from BookTube. And now I am even part of it, but I hope I am not too late to the party. Earlier I said that I didn't really have a hobby of reading, and now it is the time to explain further to you guys. Because the next question I have is, which childhood fantasy book still hold a special place in your heart? If I'm being very transparent here, I don't really read much when I was young, and the only book that I can really remember of is Harry Potter, but in English. So let me tell you more about it here. Obviously, you can tell by my accent, English is not my mother tongue. So when I was young, my parents and their group would think that reading or watching any English material would be useful for me to learn this language. Of course, at that time, Marvel, this brand, was not that big yet. The only popular and the biggest cultural export in English is the one and only Harry Potter. Although I was probably around 9 or 10, I remember my parents bought me a book from the Harry Potter series, but don't ask me which one. It is definitely not even the first book in the series, but I think it is called The Prisoner of Azkaban, if I'm not wrong here. Obviously, you can tell I haven't read the series yet, even now. From the perspective of you guys, English as your first language, you would think that 9 or 10 is like for sure the suitable age for reading Harry Potter. But I mean, English was not my first language, was not my mother tongue. I barely read anything before. So when I picked up that Harry Potter book, I was shocked by like how floppy, how thick it is, and it is like full of words that I don't really understand. I did struggle a lot to get into this world and comprehend what is actually going on because, I mean, also people around me, no matter it's like family or friends, they simply didn't read. I still remember one thing those parents group taught me was not to search the meaning of every single word on the book. You need to try to guess by like what's happening around there, and you can probably come up with the meaning of it. But how on earth could I do it? I think the words that I understand is definitely less than those I don't understand. I couldn't guess by what was going on around that paragraph. Dumb me even tried to search the meaning of the word perhaps. This word got like a literal meaning, but even if you search for it, at that time I didn't understand it at all. And I also remember a couple of months later, my mom told me I got you a present and I was so excited about it. It turns out to be the hardcover of the last book of this series. It was the original cover and you can already tell how thick that book is. I was shocked. But at that time, I still haven't finished the second book, The Prisoner of Azkaban, so how on earth could I start the last book of the series? It was really weird. So weirdly, the childhood fantasy book that still holds a special place in my heart in the wrong way is the Harry Potter. The next question I have already answered before, and it is, what was the first epic fantasy series I tackled? It was A Song of Ice and Fire by George R.R. Martin. Looking back now in hindsight, A Song of Ice and Fire is definitely not a good starting place for me as an amateur because of how intricate, how complex the world building was. Watching the drama series did help me a little bit because I can refer the name of the characters to the actors. Or is it like the other way around? But as we go into the series, it just got more complicated and started to deviate from the TV series. Like I said many times already, I didn't have a hobby of reading before, so it was really tricky, a bit challenging for me to figure out when can I read. I think the reason why I read so slow or like took me a month to finish a book is because I read only during the weekend. Now I'm more comfortable to squeeze out more time from a day to read, let's say straight after waking up, before going to bed, before starting making dinner, or if I can, the whole weekend dedicated to reading. These were usually the time I picked up my phone and started scrolling. So here is a tip for you guys if you're still searching for one. The way that can help you to read more is to replace your phone's screen time to reading. It is very effective. I know many people do this as a reading challenge before, but honestly, I think it is just like the perfect way to read more. And yeah, A Song of Ice and Fire is the very first epic fantasy series I tackled. And again, my answer can actually answer the next question. Did a movie or TV adaptation need me to read a fantasy book, A Song of Ice and Fire? The next question is slightly more exciting because it is not related to the previous questions. What fantasy book do you wish to read again for the first time? I think the way to answer this question is like I want to experience this world again, and if I want to be like a first-time reader, that means that I better not know anything about the plot or twist so I can feel them again. I would say that my answer here is The Green Bone Saga by Fonda Lee. If you don't know, this has become my all-time favorite fantasy series. It is a more character-driven story, and I never feel for characters in a fantasy world like this before. I remember I got emotional quite a lot of time in this series, and also when the first twist hit, I didn't see it coming at all, and it just spins the plot to another level, which was great. I really loved the Nopi clan and the Cole or Cow family. I think this series is definitely better to read as a first-timer rather than a reread because of all these unexpected ups and downs, and you will feel for all the characters in this world. I just wish I could erase my memory like this and read this series again because I mean it was just like so great. The next question is also quite different. Which fantasy book made me realize fantasy, this genre, is more than magics and dragons? In my mind, I can quickly come up with two answers. The first one is The Tinted Cup by Robert Jackson Bennett, the first book of the Shadow of the Leviathan series. It is quite a surprise to me because before I read quite a lot of epic fantasy, which typically falls into the category of magics and dragons. So reading The Tinted Cup was quite different because it is a hybrid of fantasy and mystery. Never in my life I would imagine an author combining these two genres and everything still makes sense. You got the fantastical elements in this world and the logical explanation for a mystery. The other one is The Teller of Small Fortune by Julie Leung, my very first cozy fantasy read. I never read any cozy fantasy before, and I always wondered what's so special about cozy fantasy, why many people are loving it. After completing The Teller of Small Fortunes, I started to get why. There are still some like magical moments like telling your fortunes by looking at the tea leaves. But the story is more about the little adventure of this group of unexpected characters, and on the road there were some life lessons for you to take home, which I think is heartwarming. So this book do change my view about cozy fantasy, and I may read another very popular cozy fantasy later this year, which is Legends and Latte. The next question is also an interesting one. What underrated fantasy book do you wish more people knew about it? Looking across my shelves, you can already tell I read quite a lot of popular hype authors like Brandon Sanderson, of course, Robert Jordan up there, Sarah J. Maas, Fonda Lee, and also R.F. Kuang. So if I need to pick up an underrated but also a good one, obviously, for cozy fantasy, I would say Sorcery and Small Magics by Margaret Ducey, the first book of the Wilder Song trilogy. It is like the Tale of Small Fortunes. It is about a little adventure where Leo messed up with a grand spell and tied himself up to his long-term nemesis, Grimm. They have to travel to the Forbidden Land together and try to undo this spell. I like it because it is fun, but at the same time heartwarming to see this unexpected pair slowly opening up their feelings to each other. The other one is quite a different one because I have a gothic horror, and it is Strange Beasts by Susan J. Morris. It got some sort of mystery element and set in the 19th century Paris, where once again a pair of unexpected partners have to solve a series of brutal murders together. This one is definitely more graphic, so watch out if you don't like it, and I didn't expect I would like this kind of slow burn romance in this book. These two, I don't think there are too many people rating them on Goodreads, so I consider them as underrated, and feel free to try it out. The next question is kind of similar. It is about book recommendation. What fantasy book would you recommend to those that are new to this genre, and why? Here, I don't want to be cliche. I don't want to repeat all those popular hype authors I have just mentioned, and you have probably come across with them before. So my pick here is The Fall by Ranka Hill, the first novella of the Bound and the Broken series. Now, I know that I have talked about this novella before in other book recommendation video, but I just find this book really accessible if you're new to fantasy, this genre. Also, I have just completed the fourth novel, and what a masterpiece it is. The Fall is a novella, so it is not long. I think it is even less than 100 pages. So as a newbie, you don't really have to spend too much time to find out whether you would like fantasy or not. I keep doing this. If you don't know, The Fall is set 400 years before the main plot. It is very action-packed with a lot of fighting around this evil plan. Can you imagine a 100-page long novella screams epic in every possible sense? This one do. There will be world building, fighting, magic, mythical creatures. So if you want to explore more about fantasy, this genre, I think The Fall would be a good starting point. Coming to the second last question, back to something more personal. How has your taste in fantasy changed over the years? To be honest, I don't think my taste has changed drastically since I read more. Not from YA to adult, from epic to romantasy only. But I would say that I rely less on YouTube or Book Talk for my next fantasy read. Like I said, I used to and still watch a lot of booktube. Because of this platform, I started to read fantasy and get to know these great authors like Brandon Sanderson, Robert Jordan, Robin Hobb, Fonda Lee. Now I would go to a bookshop to see if there's any interesting new release, and I will also keep an eye on some fantasy book subscription just in case I miss out some exciting ones. If we are really talking about taste only, I would say that I don't limit myself to epic fantasy series anymore. I did try out more since last year, cozy fantasy, mystery, horror, or even romantasy. So I would say that my reading taste has got more diverse over the years. Finally, coming to the last question, tag a few booktubers you wanna hear answers from. Here, I wouldn't tag anyone because if you are lucky enough to come across with this video and watch this far, feel free to make a video about it yourself and I don't mind it at all. So here are all the questions for my very own What Book Got You Into Fantasy tag. I hope that throughout all these questions, you will get to know me more, not just like a content creator online, but also as a real person. So if you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a like, subscribe to my channel Fantasy so you won't miss anything from me. I'll see you all real soon. Goodbye.